You're listening to the Bulldog Hour, getting you inside the Wilson football program with weekly game previews, recaps, highlights, and interviews. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bulldog Hour. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays, here in the Bulldog Hour studios with not only my co-host, Justin Raffoff, but we are here with a guest once again. We love having guests on the show, and tonight it's very important to have a guest on the show as Justin and I are in the middle of a live fantasy football draft as we speak here. But we welcome to the show. He's no stranger. He's been on plenty of times before, but it's great to have Mike Drago back from MikeDragosports.com. Mike, thanks for being here.
Joe, I had to come by and try to pick you guys up. I mean, you're so down here after that game Friday night. It was a tough one, no doubt, but long season ahead. You have a good team. Things will be okay. Just don't get off the try to talk you off the ledge here a little bit.
We need guests on for weeks like this,
yes,
Justin.
And it's funny because we talk about this every time there's a loss. We talk about these are obviously not as much fun to do, and I'm thankful we have a guest after this one because it was a tough one. Usually you and I, if it's an away game, you and I will talk about the game and just all kinds of stuff, high school games, scores that are coming in all night, and then we go our separate ways once we get back, and then we're usually after we settle in and get something to eat or whatever, we are also texting about other stuff we're seeing coming in. There were no texts on Friday night.
Yeah, we just kind of
it was just that was it.
I actually had a lengthy text exchange with Coach O'Neill from Why Missing. He knew that we were in a tough place, just feeling down, and we talked about a lot of things about high school football and coaching, and that not everything goes the way you expect it to go, and it's how you respond. And we've seen Wilson do that plenty of times, including a few times in the last handful of seasons.
Right,
Wilson's been there.
Yeah, exactly. We've had and we talk about this when we talk about the schedules. Looking at the schedule, Roman Catholic and Central Dauphin and Mifflin, and you have a lot of games, non-league games that are going to be really tough. And hey, that's what can happen. So yeah, obviously, we're here to. We'll talk about the game. We'll talk about some of the things we saw. I did feel like we improved in a bunch of areas from the week before. So, we'll talk about that and preview next week's game where hopefully we can get on the right track and turn things around. And like Mike said, thankfully it's not a 2-week season. So
right, there's 8 more games left to go, and we will have plenty to talk about them as the season progresses. We will talk about Game 3, Martin Luther King, towards the end of the show. But, Mike, it's times like this, Justin and I appreciate having a different set of eyes to kind of tell us what they saw at the game Friday night. And hopefully, like Justin said, you did see some would-be improvements from the game against Roman Catholic. But since it's the first time you're on for the 2023 season, just kind of give us your initial thoughts about the Bulldogs and what you expect to see maybe going forward.
Well, everybody knew the defense was going to be the area of concern because you graduated 9 starters from a very good defensive team, and including a guy like Cam Jones, who's just a tremendous player, one of the greatest players in Wilson history. He's easily in the top 10 players because he's so versatile, and he carried this team last year in a lot of respects. And you don't have him out there. On the one side at cornerback where, nobody's going to throw to him. So you can, set your defense up knowing you can leave him alone, that nobody's going to even challenge him on that side. So, that's the kind of guy you can't replace. But it's going to take time. Doug Doms knows that. His coaches know that. The striking thing, and it's hard to say because everything's relative. Was it Central Dauphin's offensive line being so big and physical, or is Wilson just not defensively a physical team right now? They just don't have that big stud guy who's going to come in there, and knock some people over. like a Schonauer or a guy like that who could be in the middle of your defense and just rock people and set the tone. And I didn't see anybody like that Friday night. Now maybe again, Central Dauphin turns out to be to do this to a lot of teams. So we'll see. It's it's the season that unfolds. Chapter by chapter each week, and you learn a little bit more about your team and about the teams you're playing. And so, but right now, that's what struck me. And Doug said we have to be more physical, and they weren't getting to those backs in the backfield, and even once once their backs turned upfield, they were still getting a lot of yards after the first hit. They were
Yeah, there was a lot of. It seemed like, there would be an opportunity to make a play for maybe like a 2 or 3 yard gain, and it would turn into maybe a 3 to 6 yard gain. And difference between giving up 2 and 3 on the first 3 downs and giving up 3 to 6 on the first 3 downs is the difference between first downs. And when that happens, and it also seemed like, we'd have difficulty making 3 plays in a row sometimes, so we'd get maybe stop them for a 1 yard gain, stop them for a 2 yard gain, but then quarterback was able to get 8 on 3rd and 7, things like that. And I'm not looking at a list of the, play by play things, but that's how it felt. It felt like we were close to a number of stops. Well, even at the end, we were close, so close to a couple stops. It just didn't go our way. And, and that's what I know in terms of, this is me already. We're only a few minutes in. This is me like turning into that optimist, right? Like,
hey, that's what we
right,
need. That's what
blind
we want to
optimism. That's what it is about. But like, I look at, a week ago, I don't know how many things we were talking about that it even felt like we were close. Now, a lot of that, granted, is playing against Roman Catholic. Like, that's a whole different situation. But like,
we said it last week. I honestly thought they looked like more of a complete team this year than they did last year.
Walking out of that game, though, it wasn't like, hey, we were really close to being like on that level. Not to say we couldn't get there, but you never know. But like, it was just a different animal. Leaving Friday, well, no, not leaving Friday, but here on Sunday night, looking back on Friday, I'm like, well, it felt like maybe we were close on a couple things, and there were improvements from then, but there's still a lot of work to do. But like we said, it is week 2, or week 3, depending on how you count it, when they flip that calendar.
I guess
just
tonight.
Finished
week 2.
Right.
We're on to week 3.
Right.
There's no week 0. We're not doing any of that stuff anymore.
Right. So we're on to week 3, and because we're in week 3, hey, like, see what we made improvements on. Keep going there. See what we still need to improve on, and let's start to get right. And I said to Joey, I think just by accident, I kind of found my take. I think was that, look, the playoffs don't start after week 2. Now, we've got a long way to go before we even ever worry about that. Let's get on the right side of the win-loss column first and just play 1 week at a time and just kind of see where you end up, because you can't control any of the other stuff. But hopefully, we can string together some wins here and end up in a good spot come October.
Before we talk more about Wilson's overtime loss to Central Dauphin, I do want to thank the 2023 season, our 9th season here on the Bulldog Hour, the presenting sponsors of Bill Mays, my dad, and Mays Sandwich Shop, as well as White Star Tours for their support this year. In addition to them, we also have a bunch of other Season 9 sponsors here at the Bulldog Hour, including Mike Drago and MikeDragoSports.com. Mike, thank you very much for supporting the show again for 3 straight years. Every year the website's been around, you've been supporting us here, so we really do appreciate that. The Hop family and 5 anonymous donors as well. Every little bit helps us here at the show try to get bigger and better each and every day, each and every season. And this group of individuals and corporations have helped us out in a big, big way. So thank you very much. In addition to those sponsorships, advertisings, and the donations, you can also help us out by visiting the website bulldoghour.com or taking part with our social media interactions and Justin's favorite.
Yeah, like and share. If you when you see something you like, make sure you spread the word. That just helps us kind of get some feedback and know, oh, they liked that.
Yes,
and hopefully we can have some player interviews for you at some point this
player
season.
and coach interviews. Was hoping to do that Friday night. We don't take part in that after the loss. Just let people gather their thoughts and move on. But we will be with them as soon as the Bulldogs get their first victory. We will be talking to some players and coaches. Our next live show will be a week from now, next Sunday, September 10th at 8:30, all the normal places. So here we are, week 2 in the books. Overtime loss to Central Dauphin, 36-35. You know, I had some pre-game discussions with a former teammate. People may know him by the name of Chad Henney, about our distaste and dislike of the Rams because, well, they ended my Wilson football career back in 2002, and obviously Chad was a huge part of those teams that I was on. And he remarked to me as we were leaving, he said almost the exact same score as that district championship game. It was 35-33. This was 36-35.
Wow. Interesting.
But one of the things, Mike, and I know you remarked this in your previews leading up to the game this week about the matches between Wilson and Central Dauphin, all relatively low scoring, at least in terms of the way high school offenses are nowadays. You're routinely in the mid-30s, 40s, 50s points. Wilson Central Dauphin's usually a different beast. This one got maybe a little bit higher because of the overtime, but it was still a back-and-forth battle trying to gain every inch, every yard, which Central Dauphin was really, really strong at. You hinted at it already. They had a mammoth offensive line that just at times took over the game. And that is one thing that I believe is the most surprising so far after 2 weeks is there hasn't been a consistency or a cohesion to either the offense or defensive line for the Bulldogs. And after returning so many guys, especially on offense, I think that's the biggest surprise to date. Now, I know there were some injuries. Matta hasn't played at all yet. And towards the end of the third quarter and throughout the fourth, Jack Dendle didn't play at all with a knee injury. That's a big body to be missing in there. He's a force to be reckoned with, and they certainly missed him at the end of the game. But it was just disappointing. It was just frustrating. One thing that Coach Doms pointed out at the end was that the team didn't give up. They kept fighting. They kept scrapping. And I've said this to a few people, including Justin. It just feels like right now something's either missing or hasn't clicked. So they haven't come completely together. We saw them all off season without the pads on, things working really well. But now that they've gotten into a battle against two very good opponents, they just haven't gotten in sync yet.
Well, let's just take a step back and look at your opponent, Central Dauphin. It's, one of the top programs in District 3 for the last 30 years, just like Wilson. And they do things the right way there, just like they do in West Lawn. Excellent coaching staff, excellent tradition. They've won district championship games. They've won a state championship. Their coach, Glenn McNamee, excellent coach, and he knows Wilson inside and out. He always has. So you have to look at your opponent, and it was basically an even game. I mean, each team scored 5 touchdowns. They happened to go for the 2 and make it, and because they had the second possession of overtime, had it flipped and Wilson was the second team, maybe Doug goes for 2 there, because his team was certainly fading a little there in the fourth quarter with the cramps, and he's thin, he knows that, so that would have been a situation where he'd look at it and say, we don't want to go 2 or 3 more overtimes, let's get it done. So it's a coin flip game, so the glass is half full. You guys are talking about it being half empty, but I'll look at it as half full because losing to a team like Central Dauphin, no disgrace, and they're going to be there right at the end in districts. You might run into them again, and it'll be another great game.
They suffered a loss in week 1 to Central York, another very strong team in District 3 6A. We've seen Manheim Township and Cumberland Valley, all these teams kind of playing a round robin. So a lot of the big heavyweights in District 3 6A have all played each other in the first 2 weeks, with more to come. Obviously, a lot of football left to go. 8 games, haven't even gotten into league play yet for the Bulldogs. But wanted to talk a little bit about stats. I was surprised to see just how many tackles Ryan McMillan had Friday night. I guess I shouldn't be surprised with the way the defense, the number of plays that the defensive saw. It makes sense, but Ryan McMillan had 12 total tackles. Christo Hunsaker had 8.5. Cam Zullinger had 7.5, including half a sack. Someone whose name I heard a lot, I actually thought he might lead Wilson in tackles, was Austin Valukiewicz. I thought he played really well at his outside linebacker spot.
He really stepped up on the defensive side. Playing both ways. He had a couple really tough catches in week 1 against Roman Catholic, but he had some big tackles on Friday night.
That those defensive stats can be deceiving because CD ran the ball 61 times and they had 7 completions, so that's 68 plays you need to tackle plus special teams. So that number's a little inflated because I mean to me the most eye-popping stat is that time of possession. It's almost 2-1. It was 30 minutes to about 18, and that's watching the game. I'm surprised it was even that close. It just seemed like Wilson's defense couldn't get off the field. CD kept converting, and they even converted a 1 4th down during regulation, and then the one in overtime too. So, they only punted twice in the game. But the good thing, I think Wilson punted once, so that shows you, they couldn't be stopped either. And I think it's a good point here to talk about your quarterback, Tommy Hunsaker, was just downright terrific. He kept him in that game with his feet and his arm and his poise. He's 100% better than this time a year ago. That's safe to say.
Perfect segue from the media mogul over there for our player of the game. Is Tommy Hunsaker. He played phenomenal. You talked about it in the lead up to this season about how well he played in the Harrisburg game, and I'm sure he would tell you that Martin Luther King, Roman Catholic wasn't what he wanted from his play, especially early on. He seemed to settle in after that, but man, was he really good Friday night. Keeping the offense in the game moving throughout. He was 16 of 25 passing, 262 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. He was also able to do it with his legs, 11 rushes for 57 yards and a score. But it was him being able to extend plays, keep plays alive, and keep the defense honest because he was the dual threat that was able to keep the Wilson offense going toe-to-toe with Central Dauphin throughout. Anytime Central Dauphin scored, Tommy and the offense was able to answer. I mean, his remarkable play when he hit Jackson Wagner on, a 77-yard touchdown, I think. I felt like he ran around back there for 2 minutes trying to figure out where he can throw the ball.
I was trying to describe the play to someone, and then I'm like, they talk about how like quarterbacks need to have that clock and all that stuff. And I realized I have zero concept of how long he was running around because it felt like he was running around for minutes there, and you're like no, get rid of it. It was the perfect example of one of those no, yes,
thank you
plays.
But you want to describe that play? Just talk. You have to mention Fran Tarkenton's name or Roger Staubach because that's what he was like, zigzagging around back there, and he must have changed directions 3 times. And another remarkable stat: he was sacked 1 time the whole night. It easily could have been 3 or 4, but he ran out of several would be, and that played it the touchdown pass to Jackson. That looked like a certain sack there, and somehow he managed to get out of it and maintain enough poise to look downfield and get the ball to his receiver.
One thing I really liked as part of the game plan. The game plan seemed a little bit different than Roman Catholic. They were incorporating the flares of the swing passes to Corell Akings, who had a nice solid game, but getting him involved in the passing game really worked well, including to set up what would have been a potential game-winning field goal there right after Central Dauphin drove down the field to tie it 28-28 on the touchdown 2-point conversion. Wilson's offense and Tommy Hunsaker gets the ball, and they just start to methodically work their way down the field, and finally with 4 seconds left to go, something like that, set up for a potential game-winning field goal. Unfortunately, it was wide. You could always point to a few plays that, man, if this had gone differently. Unfortunately for Wilson, there was that the only? No, there were Central Dauphin had an interception. I was going to say, was there only one turnover? But there was the Kieran Plummer interception in the end zone near the end of the first half. Wilson also had a fumble that ended a drive. And you said there weren't many punts in the games. The offense were making the defense work for it. The fumble near midfield for the Bulldogs and then 2 missed field goals obviously had a huge impact on the Wilson loss.
I go back to that interception. You glossed over that. Maddox Groover, tremendous play in the corner of the end zone, out jumping that wide receiver. I mean, that's just a good athlete on the field. And
For sure.
if you're a basketball fan, you know about Maddox, and he's going to be, continue to be a key guy both ways as a receiver. He made a really nice catch and a run after a catch as well. And we're talking about Tommy, as good a game as he had. You have to remember his number one receiver hasn't been out there the first 2 weeks. Edison Case had that dislocated elbow, and he'll be back soon, maybe this week, definitely week 4. But, he's a big target, and that's going to open up things, even more. And you have a good tight end in Brady Klein, who had 2 touchdown receptions, and with Aiken showing he can catch the ball really well.
Yeah.
Your offense is going to be tough to stop, even if you don't have a consistent running game, which you haven't established yet. But still, if you just show enough, and Aiken looks like he could be a pretty good back. But Tommy's got a lot of nice options there when he's dropping back to pass.
And it'll be interesting with as Edison gets back, I know they may try to ease him in. He might start on one side, but having him back at safety, I know he's been itching on the sidelines, because he really knows what he's doing when he's out there.
He's a very cerebral player.
Yes. And so he's on the sidelines and he knows, I know at Roman Catholic, he was very in tune with what he felt was coming, from the defensive side of things. And having someone out there with that, that ability, that skill set in real time, you never know. Could that make a difference in one play in a game? And again, in the Roman Catholic game, I don't know that it matters. But in a game you lose on a 2-point conversion in overtime, maybe it matters. And maybe not on the plays at the end even, but just one play throughout the game might change the game completely. And I think he has shown over the last couple of years the ability to make big plays, and so I am excited that hey, we're looking at what can we do to just get over that hump? Well, maybe a player like Eddie helps us get there. Not putting it all on him. Not saying it's going to be all on him and he's the different. No, but we'll take whatever little bits we can add up to get over that hump, right?
So, Mike, after the first 2 games for the Bulldogs, you got to see them now. You saw them play Central Dauphin, scanning the games that have happened, the games that are coming. Do you think Wilson's still pushing Manheim Township, or do you think there's any other LL teams that should strike fear in Wilson on their schedule? Obviously, they have started the league slate with Reading in 2 weeks. Then they have an interesting game down at Lebanon with Cedar Crest, who Cedar Crest on Thursday night knocked off CD East, and it wasn't even close. I thought CD East was a playoff team possibly this year. They've been right there over the last few years, so that score was a shocker to me. Do you think Wilson's still the team to fight Manheim Township, or are there a few other LL1 teams that Wilson should be afraid of on that schedule?
No, I still think Township's the team to beat. I mean, they returned a lot of guys from last year. They had a good team last year, but they should be, and they are very good this year. You look at their first 2 games. I mean, they beat Cumberland Valley 35-6. Now, this isn't the Cumberland Valley of old. That program has slipped, but still, it's a huge school, and to dominate them that way is interesting. And then Dallastown 56-0. Again, I don't think Dallastown's great, but 56-0. That's a statement. So they've been as good as advertised, if not better. The thing going in Wilson's favor, that game is not till week 10. And, of course, it's a home game, too. But still, that's a long, long way. In 8 weeks, a lot of things can change. Sometimes teams peak early, and maybe Township has peaked already, and this is as good as they're going to be. And Wilson certainly has a lot of room to grow. And it's far, we're light years away from worrying about Section 1 title and all that stuff, because lots to be decided. But to your question, they're the team. I'm not going to buy into Cedar Crest. They've had good starts before, and then they get into Section 1. And, when's the last time they gave Wilson a game? You guys were like in third grade or something.
No, I unfortunately was on the team. 2001, 21-0 at Gursky. Snapped the home winning streak.
Right.
Brandon Kirsch and Jaron Haynes had something to say about that. And that came up in my correspondence with Jeff today about streaks and things like that. I said, honestly, I don't think Wilson's lost 3 games in a row in a season, not overlapping between seasons, since my junior year in 2001, when we started 2-0, but then lost 3 games in a row at Whitehall right after 9/11, then to Cedar Crest at home, and then went to McCaskey with Perry Patterson. Lost 3 games. I'm not sure Wilson's lost 3 games in a row in a season since that time. So obviously, this game against MLK this Friday could be the first 0-3 start since 1965, and the first 3-game losing streak in a season since 2001. Well, we're not on the MLK yet, though. Let's talk a little bit more about some of these other teams, Mike. Since this is the first time you're on this year, what do you think about Hempfield? What are your thoughts on the Black Knights?
I think everything went right for them last year. They won a lot of close games. They won, they beat both Township and Wilson in field goal games, and I think they won a total of 3 games by 4 points or less. So, and they've lost some key guys since then. Now they did get their big lineman back, David Pally, who was gone for a month or two, at least in his own mind. He had transferred, never actually left.
Right.
He was talking about going to IMG Academy, and fortunately he returned. And I know nobody in West Lawn would have minded if he had gone to Florida, but I hate to see a local player, so to speak, go to one of those academies. I think that's generally a mistake, and he's a good player, but I don't think he's that good that he needs to go to Florida, and he also doesn't need to go to Florida to get some attention and get some exposure, because he's already got a full ride to USC, right?
Yeah, like I get if you're in a spot, and I can't pretend to know all the situations. If you're in a spot where you feel like that's what you need in order to get those things, he didn't need that. He had all the offers. He's going to get to go wherever he wants to go. And in football, you're going to be, if you want to be there, you're going to be there for 3 years before you can go to the pros anyway. This isn't basketball. In basketball, you might be looking like, hey, I've got to maximize my high school years because I'm only going to college or the developmental NBA program thing for 1 year before I can go into the NBA. Like,
right.
You still have your time as a football player to grow before you're going to the NFL. So, like, I say that, there's obviously a market for it because they just got bought by that capital firm for like $1 billion or whatever it was. But
I think people get in the heads of some of these kids, and if their parents haven't been exposed to high school sports, they don't know. You could sell them a bill of goods, and I think I put this out in a tweet during the preseason. I was going through rosters and seeing a lot of kids transferring to these academies and private schools outside of the PLAA. And I just wondered aloud, what percentage of these work out well? Right. How many of these things turn out well?
1 in 5, 1 in 10.
Yeah, and I guess Michael Ford from Governor Mifflin now plays at Roman, and I think he had a pretty good game.
Yeah, he did.
He made himself known. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you want exposure as a high school football player, most of that comes in the spring and summer at camps at Penn State and Lehigh and Villanova and Delaware. That's where you go and show yourself against other elite players, and the coaches are there, and they can see you up close. They get on the field, they talk to you, and they really get to know you at these things. And, yeah, obviously you want to see a kid perform on a Friday night, but 90% of those scholarships are offered at those camps in the summer.
Right.
They see somebody and they get offered on the spot a lot, or they get invited to another camp or two. So yeah, it just
Yeah,
it strikes a nerve with me when I see some of these kids make these moves.
right. And honestly, if you look at the track record over the last few years, like in Berks County, like we've had a lot of kids from the Berks County schools go to big time programs. Like now they're going to those camps, they're doing those things, but I just look like James Franklin isn't worried about what Jevin Williams is doing against Fleetwood, or Conrad Weiser, or like in those games, like he obviously wants them to do well and look good in those games, but yeah, they bring those guys to those camps and they look at them and they run them through whatever they want to run them through, a controlled situation for them. Yeah, that's how they're getting those things. Yes, the tape is a big deal, and especially their trained eyes can see a lot more from that than I can. But yeah, like if you're that guy, you're going to get seen, especially on, now where it's everywhere. 30 years ago where, you had to like take a tape and send it in, that was different. The whole game's different now. Like,
and you mentioned Wyomissing. It's a perfect example. You could say, oh, it's a small school. He's playing against Kutztown, but who cares?
Right.
Now, small school. Penn State has the last 2 years signed linemen out of there. Caleb Brewer now is a senior. He's going to Penn State. Javen Williams is getting high marks at Penn State.
Joey Schlaffer, Nick Singleton.
Yep. Right.
But I mean, that's just Penn State.
Yeah. Right.
Well, and the run-ons do well too. Caleb Brown was up there for a year.
Jan Johnson,
yes.
He did okay.
He did okay. Yeah, I'd say that was okay. But Justin Weller was there for five seasons. Yeah. Actually had tried to help Mike out trying to get a Berks to Penn State list together. Unfortunately, it broke down once the available rosters online no longer included high schools. So it was a little rough, but there's quite a connection to big time college football to Berks County, and I agree.
Yeah,
I don't think you have to go to these academies.
I think you nailed it here. Like, central to this show. Yeah, not thrilled that he decided to stay at Hempfield, but for Coach Ager and honestly for him, I hope it works out, and it seems like that's what he really wanted to do. So good for him, to be secure enough in his decision to not just go with it because he felt like, oh, I made this decision, I don't want to like go back. No, he made what he felt was the right decision. Good for him.
So answer your question, Joe. Yeah, I don't think. I think everything was like a perfect storm last year for Hempfield, and they've lost some guys. Yeah, but I think Township is the team, and Wilson's got 7 weeks to get ready for him.
Yeah, I don't ever like to give anyone bulletin board material. I like to give each of these teams time in the spotlight because I don't want anyone, especially obviously the players on the team, to overlook anyone. It's just Cedar Crest jumped out to me as a bit of a surprise because I feel like every year people are talking about either them or Penn Manor as maybe this is a year that they break through and challenge the likes of what had been Wilson and Township until Hempfield had that great year last year. I don't think Hempfield's as talented as they were last year. Like you said, a perfect storm, but I definitely don't sell them short. I definitely think they're going to be a tough out. And for us, Wilson-centric again, we got to go to Landisville in a few weeks. But there's a lot of games to go before that happens, and we're not even ready to enter LL1 play yet. First up is the Martin Luther King Golden Cougars, who Wilson has played the last 2 seasons, winning by, I believe, a shutout both times.
I don't remember the shutout.
I believe it was the last 2 years. I could easily look that up. Justin and I are still in the middle of this fantasy draft, which at one point it caught us, and we drafted a kicker and a defense halfway through. So not great trying to do multiple things here at once. But up here now in week 3 in 2023 is MLK. They came to Wilson the last 2 seasons. Couldn't get him to come for a 3rd straight year. So the Bulldogs are heading down Friday night to Germantown Super Site, Benjamin L. Johnston Stadium, which I believe is where Wyomissing had their state semifinal this past December.
Yes.
You're not a fan of the Super Site.
Oh, my goodness. If I had a tractor, I'd plow that place over.
The not-so-super site? Is that what you're saying?
It's a super embarrassment. It really is. There's no way that a high school game should be played there, let alone a state playoff game. And I told Bob Lombardi as much. Right after that game, I wrote him an email and told him that the turf looked like it, that George Washington played on it, and the goalposts were leaning like 30 degrees to the one side. There were no restrooms, no concession stands, no parking. Just a warning to Wilson fans. You're going to be going back about 40 years in time.
And that's why Justin and I are going on the bus. Also, it's a 6:30 kickoff, so got to leave early. So anyone watching that wasn't aware of that, playing MLK at Germantown Super Site, the game kicks off at 6:30, not 7 o'clock. So if you are traveling down there, get there earlier and leave early. Traffic, construction, that's
I
always
know
a
people
problem.
had issues getting to Upper Dublin, and now that was, I think, due to an accident on the turnpike. But yeah, give yourself time if you're planning on making that trip.
And the score was 50-8 last year,
Okay,
Joe.
50-8. Okay, not double shutouts.
Right.
I thought, for some reason, I was thinking it was back to back, but
I'm sorry, that was the 21 score last year.
I have it right here.
Last year was, as I scroll through my website, 37-0. You're right. It was a shutout.
It was a shutout. So
Yep.
87-8 the last 2 years. Then,
Right.
if I can do some quick math there. MLK, but we talked about this when MLK came on the schedule, and that was as a result of a weird COVID dynamic in 2020, and then scrambling in 2021. They agreed to do the home game in 2021 and also in 2022. Now we're reciprocating going down there this season. The year before coronavirus screwed everything up, they were 9-1 and public league champions. So this is not a team that it has, is a bottom dweller. They've had success, and recently they've had a couple rough years now. 4-8 last year,
But 4-8 was a marked improvement
right,
from the year before.
because they were
so.
because they were 1-7. They're off to a 1-1 start this year. They lost their first game to Pottstown, 14-8. They hosted that game. Then they also hosted the first 3 straight home games for them.
Wow.
They
Good for
also
them.
hosted Merle Dobbins Votek. I'm not familiar with the entity, but they beat them 48-0.
Yeah, public league school, public league
Okay.
football. I mean, not much there. Their facilities are terrible throughout the public league. So yeah, they're not going to be very good in football. Basketball, yes. Wilson. If Wilson was playing MLK in basketball, Matt Coldren will be up late at night studying. But 11-on-11, I just can't take them.
So you don't think the Cougars can give Wilson a third loss to open this season?
I'm put it this way. I'm not gonna pick that upset this week.
Your fearless Friday
I was gonna
football
say,
forecast.
he will go on the record, and I don't think it's gonna happen.
Yeah, I'll give you guys a tip. I would say go with Wilson this
Right.
week in your picks. They beat Pottstown, but didn't Pottstown have like a 40 game losing streak in the last few years?
I'm not familiar
Yeah,
with
they- I mean,
football,
they've been pretty terrible. So to beat them by a touchdown at home, that's not a.
they lost to him.
Oh, they lost.
They lost to Pottstown 14-8.
Yeah.
They beat Merle Dobbins Votek.
So I'll be
48-0.
doubling down on the Bulldogs
You're
this
doubling
week.
down on the
Yes.
Bulldogs. Okay. I like to save that one. I think I'm saving that one for week 6 for Wilson. So
Why don't you
Of
save it
course
for
you
week
are.
10, Joe?
don't tempt me.
Yeah,
Don't tempt me.
Don't you believe?
Don't throw me under the bus. I pick Wilson every week.
I
It doesn't
know.
matter who the opponent is. I'm picking Wilson. So, so Martin Luther King down there, third straight season against them. Not a lot to say about the Cougars. It's been rough the last 2 years. They seem to have some communication issues. They struggled to get the playoff, but they were record-wise better last year. Like Justin said, 4-7, and I know they've had the talent there to win a lot of games just a few seasons ago. So I certainly don't want to sell them short.
You're sounding like Coach Mays right now. But back to the important thing as far as the Fearless Friday football forecast. Now, Joe, I know you must pick Wilson every week, being a coach in the program. I understand that. Does Justin have the same
Yes.
obligation, being a
I have a
co-host?
signed contract
Oh, okay.
that says
So
he
week
will,
10, you'll be picking the Bulldogs to win. Okay.
100%.
Absolutely.
You can mark it down now.
Absolutely.
That's fine with us.
Well, see, and it's interesting because whenever Joey asks me if I think that, Eagles are going to win, I pick against them every week.
He does.
Because then
Wilson is the opposite.
Because then right. So like Wilson, that's where I pour all my optimism and belief into the Bulldogs.
And
my other teams,
we're very cynical.
I expect the absolute worst, and then if that doesn't happen, great. And if it happened, I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah. It's a very cynical
It's
outlook
a terrible attitude
when
to
it comes
have,
to professional
No,
sports.
I understand that you're a Phillies fan, right?
Exactly.
See,
Exactly.
I understand this completely.
Hey, got the win today after a poor showing 3 of the last 4 days.
Somehow expanded their wild card lead though. They're up 5.5
That's
games
nuts.
now after losing 2 or 3.
Well, I thanked Mike when he got here for his Orioles beating the Diamondbacks, because anytime you can knock down those teams chasing Philadelphia, I'm happy about it. So.
See, this is and again, you guys don't remember this, the 40th anniversary of the Phillies being in the World Series against the Orioles.
Yes.
In 83,
So he sent me a thing the other day. There's a group online is going through what are the most entertaining possible World Series matchups, and somebody said Phillies Orioles. Well, my mom is from Baltimore,
She's
and
a
so
Baltimore,
like, and he's like, oh, this would be a nightmare for you. I'm like, oh, it would absolutely be a nightmare for me.
Well, it would be a nightmare because the Orioles will win that series. That's why.
That we're clipping that, because if that comes up in October, November, it'll be very, very
They're
interesting.
post that on the Phillies bulletin board right there. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. But yeah, Justin and I, we have eternal optimism when it comes to Wilson athletics. Obviously, specifically football for sure. But when it comes to everything else, I mean, if you saw our text threads, Penn State football, we're both huge Nittany Lions fans.
I can understand being a Philadelphia fan because the Eagles have had their miseries, and the Sixers and the Phillies. But how can you not be optimistic about Penn State? I mean, they win every year for the most part.
2017 and 2018 didn't go the way it was supposed to, and that was very frustrating.
Yeah,
now, last year was great. Last year was fantastic.
Yeah.
I loved last year. Rose Bowl champs, that's great.
You have nothing to complain about as being a Penn State grad and cheering for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah. But the season is young, just like the high school football season is young. Only 2 weeks down. But Wilson in an unfamiliar spot, sitting at 0-2. Hasn't happened since 1993. Justin and I were just on 2 years ago trying to put water on the flames of Wilson community freaking out when the Bulldogs were, 2-3, was it?
Yeah, I think
weren't they 1-3?
They might have. We might have.
I think they were
Started with a win against Central Dauphin, then lost to Mifflin, lost to Exeter. No, then because we beat MLK.
Yeah, we beat MLK.
And then,
to
then lost to Manheim Central.
And then lost. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was,
2
yeah.
and
So we got
3.
to 2 and 3.
So let me just say, you're not supposed to throw
I'm putting water on the fire.
Yeah,
I'm putting out the community that just can't chill and relax. I mean, look at the way 2021 ended. They were within a face mask on Cam Jones on a punt return in the district championship from pushing Harrisburg to the limit.
Right.
And the team has plenty of time to get right and get to the way they know they can play. We heard it. There was so much positivity leading up to the season that it would be hard for me to fathom that Wilson doesn't get right. And I think shock a lot of people. And, whether they get to 7-3 or I hope 8-2, there's no one that's going to want to play them in the district playoffs if they win 7 out of 8 or 8 games in a row.
And like you said, I think one of the biggest things is sometimes you just need to get some of that success. Like right now, I hope all their focus is not on, well, what are we going to need to do at the end of the season? What about week 10?
Right, no.
What about Hempfield? No, none of that. It needs to be on MLK. Focus and just get the job done this week. Get the job done this week. And then move on, and Reading's the week after that, correct? Back at home, because we're on that
Chad
every
Henne
other
night.
Right. Good picture with that the other night, by the way. And whoever hung that banner did a great job.
Excellent job hanging the banner. We did a good job. We did.
And but it's just one of those things where, look, I know we just hopefully sometimes when you can get that first little bit of success, I equate so much of this to when you're trying to push a car, right? It's hard to get it going, to get that inertia. But once you get it moving, it's not nearly as bad. And so hopefully, we can get a win this week, get something to feel good about, and then, hopefully you can build on that for the next week. And if they improve each week, And like I said, I feel like there were areas where you could definitely see improvements, even though the end result wasn't what we wanted. But like just in terms of how the offense looked so much better this week than they did last week. If you continue to make improvements across the board, then you hope you put yourself in a spot where you're going to be competitive in all of your games. So,
Justin, I feel like you should be laying on a couch and I should be taking notes here, asking you about your childhood or your.
That's kind of why these podcasts we do started, because Justin and I would have these cathartic conversations.
Oh, yeah.
Or venting sessions to each other, and we're just like, well, we might as well put it out there for other people to share in our misery.
I forget where we were just the other day, and somebody was like, "Oh, they're like, my son has a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. T-shirt jersey," and he's like, "How can you let him wear a Blue Jays T-shirt jersey?" I was like, "Because the Blue Jays didn't make him cry when he was in third grade. They made me cry when I was in third grade." We need those shirts that say
"Joe Carter ruined my childhood."
Yes. I saw one of those yesterday. I had never seen that before. It's a great shirt.
It is a fantastic shirt. Unfortunately, it's true. I'm 93. Will always haunted me until 2008. So.
It should have said Mitch Williams ruined my, throwing an 84-mile-an-hour fastball down the pike.
Oh, Mitch.
Oh man.
Yeah. So now I lost now I'm thinking about baseball heartbreak. I lost my train of thought. There was something I wanted to say.
Mike's getting a glimpse into the Sheetz parking lot conversations that happen on Friday nights.
Yeah. I think maybe it'll come to me, but there was another topic, Mike, that we wanted to throw at you. It actually relates back to the Cedar Crest discussion that we had of, do you think that they're going to be a challenge for teams in LL Section 1? It was very interesting to me to see a direct quote to Coach Wooldasten in the Lancaster newspaper article, their preview, essentially by name calling out the top three dogs in LL1, Wilson, Manheim Township, and Hempfield, for recruiting. And I couldn't believe, we were getting a little hint of that at the kickoff luncheon with you, that would be running. And we were aghast, and I didn't know, I wanted to get you on the record comments about what do you think about that little soundbite.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. I don't know. Now, Manheim Township, I know they've had a few pretty good players from Berks County end up over there a few years ago. The Emge brothers, the quarterback, and the two twins, Sam and I forget the other one's name, and Luke was the quarterback, and they were all really good football players. And that's like adding 4 or 5 starters to your roster. It was great, but Wilson. I mean, I'm trying to think of who the last name transfer. I mean, Iggy came over a few years ago, Iggy Reynoso, and then I'd be hard pressed to name a whole bunch of transfers that Wilson has gotten. I mean, the Weller came in from Chicago, but his dad grew up in this neighborhood, and he moved back for family. So I don't think he moved from Chicago so his sons could play football in the program.
When Iggy played, were those the years did we not even play Cedar Crest those years?
Yeah, I don't believe Cedar Crest was up.
I think that might have been the year they were down at
Section
2.
Yeah, so
I don't know where he got that from or what he was thinking of. I mean, honestly,
well, people, man, this is going to take us on. We've got 15 minutes. We're fine. People still are bent out of shape about Carey. We're 30 plus years removed from that now. And he came as a junior. From Lebanon. I know people were very upset about that.
I thought he came as a sophomore. I thought he played
football season.
Okay, yeah, because I thought he played baseball as a sophomore here.
Yes, but I'm sorry, football specific mind. Yeah. Yes. But yeah, he came later in his sophomore year.
And he's a pretty good one. If you're going to get a transfer, I mean, an NFL quarterback who plays 18, 20 years and throws for more yards than Johnny United's, people remember that.
Well, and the one that always gets me is the people that talk about Chad Henne. That he moved into the Wilson.
So he did. He was a transfer
in third grade.
Right. He transferred from Hamburg, I think.
It's amazing the posts that people
talk
about him.
I'm glad that Sheldon Sue had the foresight to see in their second grade son that hey, you know what,
NFL player.
Right.
And yeah, they knew that as a third grader. Had to get him to Wilson as a third
grader.
Wait,
a transfer is a transfer.
It frustrates me because I guess I don't like when I think of transfer, I think of college football, moving school to school at a whim. Sometimes they're for actual reasons, family related, academic related. They're obviously mostly for athletic, and it's a scholarship thing. It's a whole different animal. I don't like the word transfer in high school football because if a family literally moves to another district, that's not a transfer. They moved, and I've already said, and I believe I've put this on the podcast many times. If you're willing to uproot your family to move to another district, you can do that for whatever reason you want. And I don't really have a problem with that because you are literally uprooting your family. And I know the PAA's put in things now that if you do that, regardless of the reason, after right before your sophomore season?
Before your 10th grade season, yeah.
If you do it before that, you're fine.
Right, yeah.
Anything after that, you're going to have to sit out the postseason unless that you go through that review process.
Waiver.
But if you are, and like you brought up the MGs from Fleetwood to Township, they moved into that district. I don't have I have no problem with that. I'm not going to sit there and be like, well, MG's transferred the man in town. They moved. Right. Like, did they do it for athletic reasons? Maybe. I don't know. But they moved their family. Like, that doesn't bother me at all. So these comments bugged me because I was like, Justin and I can sit here and name a dozen Wilson athletes that we coached or played at Southern Middle School, or even the freshman team didn't play at Wilson in high school because they moved. It makes me very angry that Coach Wildassin is throwing this accusation at these three schools without any proof, just like the general stuff that's out in the ether that is just the same ham-fisted arguments that don't even apply anymore, or something that could have happened decades ago. But again, still, the way I talk about it, it still was a legitimate transfer. Kerry Collins lived in West Lawn for the last 2.5 years of his high school career. Chad Henne lived in the Wilson district since his 3rd grade year, despite what people in comment sections online want to tell you they know. It's just frustrating to me. So I hate the word transfer in anything I read about high school sports because they're not transfers to me if you're legitimately moving. And I also don't like, because I know people will talk about the non-boundary schools, the Catholic charter or whatever. I don't like, and I believe this is happening somewhere in Pennsylvania right now, a player went to a non-boundary school but then went back to the school that he lives in, and they don't want him to play. He's not allowed to play. I think the PAA ruled against him. He's returning to the district that he should be a part of. Yeah. He chose to leave. And I understand there's issues with that kind of thing, but he's playing with the school that he should be playing for. It boggles my mind the way we wrap ourselves up with the notion of these transfers. The very few, I think, are legitimate ones that you're like, that's not okay. Right. What's happening?
Right.
There.
They're out there, and I see them more in basketball than football, but they're still out there in football. And when I see a kid transfer, and there was a receiver from a small school in the Lancaster-Lebanon League, and he transferred to Bishop McDevitt this year, and I just thought, what are you doing? Do you think you're actually going to play there? And maybe he is good enough. We'll see. But, I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, so many of these kids get bad advice and they go there and these things don't turn out well. But, there's a lot of it going on. And I do like, for the most part, what the PAA did 3 or 4 years ago, really tightening up these rules. But like any rule, there's always a way around it. And, yeah, you could, transfer in the 3rd or 4th grade and maybe with the intent that your son or daughter is going to play it high school sports, and then it could turn out that they end up in the choir or as in the acting a part of school activities, and they don't play sports, but it's definitely a hot button issue. And as we see, Joe got a little worked up, didn't he, about this? Yeah, people do.
It frustrates me when people throw out bad accusations. If you have proof about something, but what started this, there's literally no proof. I would like to hear the proof. Yeah. I don't know that anyone's followed up about it, but it's just a frustrating thing.
Well, your week 5 show, I think you should have Coach Wildassin on. Get him on the phone and ask him.
And it was interesting, because the other part of that direct quote from him is that, basically that, no one can compete with those 3. What?
Yeah, essentially throwing his own team under the bus to say we're not good enough.
the whole thing was kind of an odd take
It's
to me.
bizarre.
And look, he knows his team. Maybe it's an us against the world thing. Like I don't know, but like it just seems odd to me. I maybe just because the things I'm so familiar with, which granted is almost entirely the Wilson program, is just like they don't worry about like people outside. The community will worry about all the extra stuff. I guarantee their sole focus this week is on what they are doing. They're not worried about anything else. They're going to worry about what they need to do for MLK this week. Like they're not making recruiting visits.
And one more thing I've noticed, because I talk to the players a lot and ask questions. The players themselves don't get bent out of shape. If their teammate transfers to another school, they're still buddies. They still see each other. They root for each other. It's the parents and the fans that get bent out of shape.
Right.
But the kids, I've never heard a player, criticize a teammate or another player for moving to a different school, even if they thought it was athletically motivated.
I think, and just to finish this topic and the show, I think back to something I see every year posted by Ross Tucker, just reminding kids to relish this opportunity to play with their friends and for their community. And I feel like too many student athletes are being robbed of that by outside forces, not working in their best interests. Because we know the statistics of how many high school student athletes get to move on and play collegiately, at least at a big level and with a scholarship. Like the ones that supposedly like you're training for, you're working towards, you're moving because it'll get you there. I think all that is quite honestly BS. I think you should stick around with your community. Again, if you're moving, this is not about like you're moving. But I'm just saying moving districts because you think it's going to get you more exposure. I don't buy into any of that. The college coaches will find you, and you will make it known. I feel like
that goes along with the specialization conversation too. And focusing on one sport from the time you're in like sixth grade.
The worst advice
and,
you could get from anyone.
Like, you talk to all the highest level people, and they're so against that, and yet you see more and more of it. It's just
your best athletes by and large are going to be multi-sport athletes.
Right. Well, if that didn't matter, then why, when Michael Bennett was a junior at Exeter playing basketball, did the offensive line coach and another Penn State coach come down and watch him play?
Right, exactly.
They weren't there to see Lonnie Walker. They were there to see how Michael ran up and down the floor, how he interacted with his teammates and coaches, and see what he looked like out of the pads. They thought it was important. And, and one more thing, while I'm on basketball, that was the beautiful thing about Stevie Mitchell and his team at Wilson when they won the district championship. He certainly had an opportunity to transfer to play at pretty much any academy or private school that he wanted in the country. But he stayed because those are his buddies. He grew up playing with them.
Exactly.
And you could tell by the way they played, and it's the same with the Reading High players. Those kids grew up playing together, and they know where they are, where their teammates are on the floor. They know where to pass the ball when they're playing defense. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. Kids who've grown up playing together and know each other, and they're a real team, and then to see them succeed.
Well, that's an interesting point because, like, I think about back to, like, one of our first episodes. Well, not really our first, but one that hits this run of where we get into Bulldog Hour, where we do the senior interviews, and how many of our kids, their favorite memories. We ask them, what's your favorite football memory?
They talk about Van Reed and Lincoln Park.
Right, they talk about Van Reed and Lincoln Park memories. And, again, in part because so many of those friends they're still playing with. But, like, they're talking about, oh, yeah, we won this game then or we lost this game that, but, like, they're talking about these, playing with these kids forever, and it brings them so much joy. And we've talked to a number of the kids who have gone on from Wilson and played at the college level, and they're loving it. Yeah. But they come back and they say,
it's not the same.
It's
a job.
So different. It's so different because it's just and not that you don't have friends on the team, but it's not the same as high school where your friend, you're just playing with all these friends you've known forever. And,
the 3 Wilson kids most recently up at Penn State that have Wilson ties. We talked to Justin Weller. We talked to Grayson Klein. We talked to Caleb Brown when he was, when they each came home and visited. We talked to them. It was like, oh, I love it, but man, it's different. It's not the same. It'll never be the same. The high school. I'm paraphrasing, but pinnacle, purest form of football is high school football. And I truly believe that because it's the best grouping of all the emotions and expectations you can get. At the higher on the ladder you climb, the less it is for fun. It becomes a job.
Sure.
So I think the student athletes, not just football, that goes to every sport. Enjoy it. Enjoy those 3 or 4 years that you get to make memories, just like Ross Tucker always puts out right before that first Friday Night Lights in Pennsylvania. That's the best message we can put out there. Don't take it for granted. All right, Mike, why don't we put a bow on our discussions? Just any final thoughts on Wilson Central Dauphin or the Bulldogs here at the week 3 of 2023?
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's a long season. They're going to win this week, and they're going to win a bunch more games going forward. And their biggest game is still light years away, and it's going to be like a different season. But by the time they play Manheim Township, that's November 27th. It'll be Halloween, and it won't be summer. So
Yeah.
lots of road to go.
My chat function wasn't working, but I see we've been getting a bunch of messages, and one of them is from your mom saying,
I bet she had Orioles comments.
Mike is her new BFF.
No, I knew that. I was like, next time I go over there, there's going to be like Mike Drago, sports.com, like stuff everywhere, because now that she's on to that you're an Orioles guy, I'm never going to hear the end of it. So.
Mrs. Henny chipped in. He was not a transfer. Stupid. 3rd grade. So I can always count on the Hennies setting everyone straight. I do like to see Tracy go after people in the comments all the time, as if they know better than the family. I never understand.
It reminds me of all those tweets when like people are like, they're ripping like the director of some movie. They're like, but they don't know it's the director, and they're like, that's not what the director meant. And they're like, I'm literally the director, or like, I am the source, like.
Yeah, interesting. But all right, well, Mike, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It was an interesting discussion. It's always great to have a different point of view on it, especially after a Wilson loss, because Justin and I find it tough to talk about when we're sitting at 0-1 for the week. So appreciate you coming on and all your support over the years as well.
Absolutely.
Glad to do it. Always enjoy it, Joe. Justin, thank you.
I've already talked to you about coming back on later in the year because I think people really enjoyed last year when we had both you and Jeff Reinert on to talk about the playoffs. Now, because of my schedule, we're going to move that up a week. I already told you guys to pencil in a date at the end of October, and it's actually going to be a preview of the Manheim Township game. So when we check back in with you on the show, I'm hoping Wilson's sitting at, 7-2 at that point, and staring down a possible battle for a championship in LL1.
And that's what I sent this to Joe on maybe late Friday or early Saturday, because again, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of conversation on Friday night, but I said, in reality, all of the goals except undefeated are still there for this team. You talk about. I know the Mifflin game always comes up because that's a huge rivalry. Winning the section is a goal. Winning district, like all of those things are still on the table. There's a lot of work to be done, but there's time to do that work. That work needs to be taking place now. But like, there's time and opportunities to still achieve a lot of goals that they set for themselves before the season. Let's make it happen.
Absolutely. That's a perfect way to end the show. So thanks again to Mike, co-host Justin. This ends episode 7 of season 9 of the Bulldog Hour. We will be back in 1 week's time to discuss Game 3 against Martin Luther King and preview Game 4, which will be Reading. The Reading game is back at Gursky on September 15th, and that will be the Wilson Football Tradition Club's Chad Henne night, where you can come to the stadium when gates open at 5:30 and get in line to have a meet and greet with Chad, pictures, autographs. It should be a lot of fun. And what's better than free? You're going to pay a dime for it. Come out and hang out with a Wilson legend, a 15-year NFL quarterback. Probably the most important thing, a 2-time Super Bowl champion. I don't think you get to say that too often. So join us in less than 2 weeks at Gursky on September 15th for Chad Henne night for a game against Reading. And it's not like Chad doesn't have any history with the the Red Knights either. So fortuitous timing for that event to take place. Had nothing to do with it. We were deciding between the 1st, the 15th, or the 29th. It just had to work with everyone's schedule, and we settled on the 15th against Reading. So that's it. So until next time, for Mike, Justin, and myself, and the entire Wilson program, remember, go Bulldogs.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Bulldog Hour. Want more Wilson football? Follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Or visit www.bulldoghour.com. The Bulldog Hour is a featured program on jmnjrradio.com.